when we decided to leave Bratislava and drove to the Hungarian capital of Budapest, and that was sort of interesting because again, um, there you know there were a lot of people in these countries that were supportive of what Dubček and the people who were trying to liberalize Czechoslovakia and democratize Czechoslovakia. There were a lot of people who were supporting that. So I remember we had dinner one night, and when the people in the restaurant discovered that we were from the United States and we were from Boston, the band in the restaurant played the Bee Gees song Massachusetts. Um, and that was pretty scary for a country that was, completely under Soviet rule, where their own troops had just been sent a couple of days earlier into Czechoslovakia to quell democratization, and there were little pieces of support for democracy, even in restaurants in places like Hungary at the time. When we realized that there was no chance for us to actually get into Czechoslovakia, the Russians had made sure that nobody, if you weren't a soldier from a Soviet bloc country, you were not getting into Czechoslovakia at the end of August. We decided to go back to Western Europe, but first went to what was then called Yugoslavia. This was before the Bosnian War, so that instead of being split into Slovenia and Bosnia, Croatia, there was just one country, Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia was sort of an interesting country at the time because it was headed by, the head of the country was a fellow named Marshal Tito. And Yugoslavia was an ally of the Soviet Union, but not the way places like Czechoslovakia and Hungary and Poland and East Germany were. He was an independent ally. And he was very concerned, since he had, done some things that the Soviets didn't like himself. Yugoslavia was very concerned that as long as the Soviet Union was taking this tremendous bad press around the world for invading Czechoslovakia, that they might at the same time just double down and invade Yugoslavia at the same time. That the old might as well be hung for a wolf as a sheep idea. That if they were going to be in trouble for invading Czechoslovakia, well, time to go get Yugoslavia at the same time. So when we entered Yugoslavia, that, although we were actually moving away from Czechoslovakia, was probably the scariest part of the entire trip, because Yugoslavia was really ready for a Russian invasion. And when I say ready, you would drive down the highway, and as you drove, across farm fields, or as the highway passed through farm fields, you would look and notice that on the sides of the roads constantly were camouflaged army positions. You had, machine guns, soldiers, trucks, and maybe the scariest of all was that as we were driving at one point, a Yugoslavian tank pulled out and followed us. It's not exactly a super highway, so nobody's going very, very fast. This was 1968 Yugoslavia, and roads were sort of like back roads, and here. But I can assure you that it's very disquieting to be driving down and having a tank with the gun facing you and a guy sitting on top of it with a machine gun directly behind you, pointed at you. At that point, we didn't know exactly what to do, so we had an American flag that we had picked up somewhere along the way. And while my brother drove, I crawled in the back seat we were driving a little Volkswagen Bug, and I crawled in the back seat, and we stuck the American flag across the rear window of the VW, and the tank seeing this, or for whatever reason, shortly after we put the flag up, decided that they did not have to follow us anymore. But that was a very that was at least as nerve-wracking as being stopped by the German soldiers with the machine guns in East Germany. Later that same day, we actually that night, before we were able to get out of Yugoslavia, we had an automobile accident. It was, as I say, it was a pretty rural area, and we unfortunately hit a deer. So now, the Russians had invaded a couple hundred miles away. This country was clearly ready for a Russian invasion of their country. Fortunately, that never happened. The Russians decided not to go into Yugoslavia. And at this point, we were stuck in the middle of nowhere in Yugoslavia. Certainly it was not a community that had hotels, motels, or anything like that. But it worked out all right, actually. The policeman came, helped us, called a local tow truck, not a tow truck the way we think of in the U.S., but somebody who could, with a rope, tow our car. And then the policeman arranged for us to sleep. I forget whether it was at his house or a friend of his, because there was no hotel or anything like that in the community. They fixed the car the next day. I think they charged us some very small amount of money. Gave us free breakfast, free lunch, and sent us on our way. So all in all, it was a very exciting time. Of course, Alexander Dubček, who had been the head of Czechoslovakia, was demoted to being essentially a forest ranger. Although later, when the Soviet Union fell apart, he became returned to becoming a major political figure in Czechoslovakia again. But all in all, it was a pretty exciting couple of weeks. When we returned home, my parents asked us, if we had any trouble during the invasion, and we said, well, of course not. We were vacationing in Italy, and my parents said, we know the both of you better than that. We know you were probably in Czechoslovakia, so you might as well tell us what really happened. So I thought that was good. This is a great project. I wish you the very best of luck with it.
Thank you so much.